Here's one I've been looking forward to getting to. It's an early to mid-60s Ampeg Gemini 1. I've not dated it yet. I'll try flowers. Belongs to a friend who's a studio owner, and he loves the sound of it, but there have been the occasional issues with people getting, so far, mild shocks from the ungrounded power cable, and that's not acceptable. So I'm glad it's only mild at this point, but we're going to get rid of all of that potential for any problems. And by grounding the chassis correctly and permanently, not only will there be no risk of electric shock, the entire amp will be quieter as well. In the 60s, Ampeg used these non-standard screws that have kind of a hourglass shape opening. I have the correct bit, so I'll get in here and remove all these and get the rear panel off. I made it an option for the owner that I can remove all these screws very carefully, put them in a bag or box, and then when the amp is done, put in high-quality, good-looking stainless steel Phillips heads. He said he wanted to keep all the originals in because if it has a problem, he'll just bring it back to me. That's fine. It's his choice, but that is a choice I make available to Ampeg owners because sometimes, depending on the model, you can't even change the tubes unless you have this bit. I can also help them find the correct bit, of course. But anyway, let me get this all taken apart and then we'll take a look at it. Okay, I shall. All right, so we've got two-prong power cable down there. We've got the foot switch, and the foot switch is wrapped around this old microphone. It's interesting. So I will divest the foot switch from that microphone and take the chassis out. Well, I was incorrect. This wasn't wrapped around it, just a similar-looking cable, but there's a good break in this insulation on the foot switch cable, so that will need to be addressed. All right, this amp has what looks to be the original 7591s. Got the inspection tag on the can cap there. I don't see a date there, but I'll look into that and I'll look and see what this is. This right here will point me to the right schematic. All right, this amp has never been serviced as far as I can tell. It's got all these original parts. For those of you who are flinching, I've already checked. There's no voltage present. The can caps are not leaking. That doesn't mean they're any good, but it means that nothing is exploded. All right, here on this little bitty PCB that's mounted to these pots, you can just see the beginnings of semicircular breaks where the pins come through the board. That's very typical of Ampegs of 60s and 70s. They didn't use much solder, and these are mechanical connections. And over time, they just develop little stress cracks. None of these are fully broken, but they have these little semicircles. Very easy to reflow that. Here you can see this little manila folder kind of thing here. It's a light brown, large rectangular object. This amp has two of them, one for each channel, and that is something that Ampeg used to hold a whole bunch of caps and resistors that were used again and again and again in these amps, so it's real cheap for them to assemble. These amps have what's called a Bax Andal tone stack, and this just saved a lot of space in the amp, having everything here with just 3 or 4 connectors that go where they go. Maybe more connectors than that. I'll know when I take a look at it. It's been a couple years since I had one in, but sometimes something within these cards can be bad. It's pretty rare. There's not a lot of voltage there the way the circuit's configured. There's a master capacitor blocking the DC from it before it gets to that stage. So typically these things hold up really well, and they can get microphonic, but it's usually not a problem because these amps don't have a lot of gain. Moving to the input jacks, they're labeled accordion, guitar. They have different amounts of input padding. Pretty typical. The only downside to this design is that none of them shunt to ground when a guitar or accordion is not plugged in. So if there's no cable inserted and you have the volume for that channel up, you will get hum. So on some of these old Geminis and similar from the 60s, I redo these for guitar like a Fender jack is wired. But I think in this case, we're going to keep everything as original as possible. So if you're not using this channel, just keep that volume off. Here the other card and PCB have the same issues with semi-broken solder joints. This little doohickey is the heart of the tremolo circuit in these amps, and it sounds fantastic. It is equivalent to the Roach and the Fender. It works a similar way, but the specs are different. Hopefully this one's working just fine. If not, my buddy Andy Fuchs makes up a drop-in replacement, but it's always nice to have the original whenever possible. So I'm going to go through here and catalog the electrolytics. There's not too many of the little axial electrolytics in the amp. A lot of the cathode bypass caps that are in the amp are smaller value films that don't go bad typically. But here, 1, 2, 3, you got 3 axials there, and then 2 axial large values, and then the multi-section can cap. And I'll see what my best options are for replacing all that fairly unobtrusively. But I think this is just kind of need a standard replacement of electrolytic caps, changing to a 3-conductor grounded power cable, and maybe replacing the wire to the foot switch, which is one of these 2 wires here. One's reverb, 3 wires. One's reverb, one's foot switch. 2 are reverb, one's foot switch. Just to get rid of that break in the insulation. It should be pretty easy. I'll see if I can find a Belden or similar cable with the same color gray. I look forward to this one.